My name is Udo. I'm one of the co-founders of Building African Fashion, and we're very happy to have you guys here again today. So we're here again for an exciting talk with Elizabeth Way, who is a curator of the Africa's Fashion Diaspora exhibition currently ongoing at the museum at FIT. It's really exciting to see the growing global interest in Africa's fashion industry and in this dynamic creative sector. From recent exhibitions such as the groundbreaking Africa fashion exhibition across the pond at the V&A that then went across the globe on a tour to small exhibitions such as another one that's also happening not too far from us, focused on African fashion at Marist College. The world is really finally starting to take note of Africa's vast contributions to the global fashion landscape. Um, these exhibitions not only celebrate the continent's rich cultural heritage, but also highlight the innovation and creative genius thriving across Africa and its diaspora. I recently attended the UN General Assembly sessions that were held in New York not too long ago. And I was really encouraged by the increasing interest and attention that even African nations are starting to pay to their creative industries. For example, Nigeria recently established a ministerial position dedicated to the creative sector. And the Afrexim Bank, a top Pan-African bank, has pledged $1 billion to the creative sectors in Africa over 3 years. So truly, there's growing international support and recognition of the African fashion sector, and that's really what brings us here today for this talk with Elizabeth Way. And I'm just going to introduce her briefly, and then we're going to go straight into the conversation with her. So she's going to give us a presentation, following which we're going to have a chance for us in the audience to ask questions, make comments, and just share any thoughts that we may have. And even as the presentation is ongoing, if you have any questions, any things that you want to share, feel free to put them in the chat so that when we get to that portion of the presentation, she'll be able to address them fully for you. So let me quickly introduce Elizabeth, and then we're going to go into the presentation. So Elizabeth Way is Associate Curator of Costume at the Museum at the Fashion Institute of Technology. She curated Africa's Fashion Diaspora, which we're here to talk about today, and edited the accompanying book. Her past exhibitions include Fresh, Fly, and Fabulous, 50 Years of Hip Hop Style. I attended that one in 2023. And Food and Fashion, also in 2023. Way guest curated Anne Lowe, American Couturier, at Winterthur Museum, Garden, and Library in 2023. She has published articles in the journal Fashion Theory and contributed chapters to several scholarly books and publications. She has also edited books, Black Designers in American Fashion, and Anne Lowe, American Couturier, also published in 2023. And with that, we want to have Elizabeth come on now and share with us more about this wonderful exhibition so that we can all learn more and really enjoy what you have put together. So Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you so much to the entire Building African Fashion team for having me. It's a real joy to connect with, people all over the diaspora, but especially Mr. Young and Junior Orina who are here, whose designs are featured in the exhibition, as well as Papa Oppong. It's really amazing to be able to connect with you this way and speak a little bit about your work in the context of this exhibition. So I'm going to share my screen. So I'm located here at the museum at FIT in New York City. I also can't see any of the participants while I'm sharing my screen. So if anything is awry or slides aren't changing or anything like that, please give me a shout out and let me know. Um, but I'm based here at the museum at FIT, and we are a museum completely dedicated to fashion. And so we're able to use fashion objects to tell a variety of different stories. And Africa's Fashion Diaspora is an exhibition idea that evolved from an earlier exhibition that I co-curated in 2016 called Black Fashion Designers. This was really a revisionist exhibition, thinking about the ways in which Black designers, mostly in the United States, but also a little bit across the diaspora, have been written out, left out of the fashion history narrative. And so this was an exhibition that kind of focused more on the fashion industry and its history. So we got a really warm reception for that exhibition, which was really exciting. And so our director asked if I could expand the idea. And I knew that I wanted to, there were so many ways to explore ideas about Blackness and Black identity as it's communicated through fashion that went beyond just um, thinking about the ways in which we've been left out of fashion history. And so this is an exhibition with a really focused narrative, thinking about some of the things I've been reading about, thinking about throughout my decade plus as a fashion scholar. So you can see an image of the gallery here, but I also want to take you back to a little bit of my source material. So I got the call from our director to start thinking about an expanded exhibition on Black designers in February 2020. And so very soon after that, we were all working from home. But this really gave me an opportunity to delve into books that I had read in the past, to revisit them, and also incorporate some new research. At the same time, I was working on my PhD, and a lot of that reading also overlapped with what eventually found its way into Africa's fashion diaspora. But I was really interested in the idea of transnational Black culture. So, what does that mean? That Black communities are separated across the world from by a lot of different factors, from ethnicity to language, religion, nationality. There are individual and unique communities, not only within the vast continent of Africa, but across the diaspora. However, there have been ongoing ideas from politicians, from philosophers, from scholars, as well as creatives of the things that connect Black communities. And so, even though this is a contested idea and is certainly not universal, there is a longevity to this thinking about what culturally connects Black communities. And so, works that really influence me in thinking about this are politicians in the post independence era, like Nkrumah and Haile Selassie, or thinkers going back to the 19th century, like Du Bois, as well as Garvey and others. And then the Black Atlantic was a real foundational text for this exhibition, thinking about the Atlantic Ocean as its cultural contact zone. And so I knew that philosophers and scholars were thinking about this idea. And I think probably one of the most illustrative ways in contemporary culture that we see diasporic ideas expressed is through music. But I also knew that fashion had a lot to contribute to this narrative. And so ultimately, this exhibition focuses on fashion design as storytelling. The designers in this section really bring storytelling to the forefront of their design. And I think it makes a real case for fashion design as art. Certainly, not every piece of clothing is a piece of art, but the designers that I focus on in this exhibition are really making that relationship very close through the ways they communicate through their design. So I want to go through the sections of the Africa's Fashion Diaspora exhibition. There are 9 sections altogether, and really these are kind of loose associations, conversations I wanted to put these designers in with each other. So definitely not hard and fast kind of, you know, sectioning of these designers into certain categories. But I also wanted to really think about what the designer was communicating with their design. So I have one positionality in terms of being a Black American, being a woman, being a fashion scholar. And so I didn't want necessarily my voice to be the overarching kind of statement on this exhibition, but to bring in as many scholars as well as the designers' voices as I could, and really use this exhibition as a platform to ask questions, to bring up ideas and think about these designers and how they're defining ideas of what it means to be a modern Black citizen in this transnational world. So, the first section in our introductory gallery is called Reaching for Africa. And this section is based on the chapter that I wrote for the exhibition publication. So, Reaching for Africa was based on the contribution I made to the exhibition book. So, because of the timeline of the exhibition planning process, especially in light of the pandemic, I had a little bit more time to plan this exhibition and book. But in that way, the book is a bit different from the exhibition. Again, I wanted to draw in as many voices as I could because I really wanted to represent different parts of the diaspora in a secondary scholarly work. And that way, students, especially, but other readers could go to one book and learn about all these different geographic areas of the diaspora from scholars who really specialized in those areas. So the book is really centered more geographically, while the exhibition is centered around storytelling and themes. But in any case, this chapter was really about the ways in which Black Americans from the 19th century moving forward conceptualize the idea of Africa, whether through aesthetics or through kind of deeper and more layered ideas. For example, the severance of the transatlantic slave trade really separated Black Americans from their histories. And so Africa as a symbol, and of course, that's a very, thinking about Africa as an entire continent with thousands of ethnic groups and communities, just kind of reducing it to Africa has been an ongoing issue, kind of in thinking about colonialist views and ideas of primitivism and exotification of the continent. But thinking of Africa in this kind of flattened ways, but also using these ideas for their own purposes to fill their needs for identity. And so it is a double edged sword, but I was really interested in that tension. So the pieces here are mostly by Black American designers who are looking at African culture and aesthetics for different reasons and in different eras. So this is a new acquisition that we acquired for the exhibition, and we acquired a lot of new pieces for the show for our permanent collection. But this is by a designer named Willie Posey, who was working in Harlem from the 1940s through the 1970s and 80s. She's actually the artist Faith Ringgold's mother. Which isn't something I really got to talk about in the exhibition, but a very fascinating part of her biography. But she designed this ensemble in the early 70s at a time in which there was a kind of mainstream craze for all things kind of African. Around the same time, we see Yves Saint Laurent's African collection, as well as Marc Bohan for Christian Dior exploring these themes. And so, on the surface, we might think that this piece really kind of fits into this idea. On top of that, there's this tendency, Western arts and design, as well as, science and biology, to look at the African continent in terms of its flora and fauna and to really erase the people. And so we have a lot of things going on in this ensemble. However, it's really important for me to place Willie Posey in her context. So, as a Black American designer working in Harlem, she's working within a generation of creators, both designers, boutique owners, textile designers, who are trying to create visibility for themselves, trying to create an identity divorced from mainstream white American culture, and really take pride and emphasize their connections to the diaspora. So this piece is a reflection of that. And what I think is so interesting is that on first glance, it could mean one thing to a viewer, but as we dig into the story, as we dig into its context, it takes on new meanings. And I think that is especially true for this piece by Patrick Kelly. So this is something that we've had in our collection for a while. And of course, Patrick Kelly, a Black American designer born in Mississippi and practicing his fashion design career in Paris, is a very interesting designer. Here he's looking at kente cloth. So kente, originating with the Asante people in Ghana from at least the 18th century. This was a very important cultural piece of production in terms of hierarchies. So it was first only worn by rulers in the upper class. And then when Ghana gained its independence, it became more a larger symbol, thinking about the nation of Ghana that, of course, encompassed a lot of ethnicities. But over the 1960s and especially through the 1990s, Black Americans adopted kente cloth as a talisman of their diasporic connection to West Africa and Ghana, especially. And so we see it in graduation stoles, we see it in decorative arts, we see it in home decor, and we see it in fashion, as we see here. Of course, kente is a beautiful strip woven fabric, cotton and silk fabric. Patrick Kelly is reinterpreting the aesthetics of it into this print. He's also adding this kind of basket headpiece. So this is again a really layered message of what how Black Americans are interpreting culture in West Africa and Ghana specifically. But Patrick Kelly again, in his context, was really well known for playing into ideas, stereotypes of Black people, Black Americans especially, playing with those stereotypes and trying to kind of take the negativity, reclaim them, and use them as a symbol of pride and freedom. And so, in this way, he's doing a bit of the same thing with kente cloth. He elevates it, whatever that word might mean, to the Parisian Fashion Week, runway, and he also is, using humor and fun to kind of think about his diasporic connections. But what's interesting is that kente is a cultural symbol that whose ownership is definitely up for debate. There is a wonderful book called Wrapped in Pride, produced by the Fowler Museum in the 1990s, that looks at a lot of different scholarship on kente, and there are some interviews there that talk about Ghanaian producers who don't want Black Americans to kind of take on kente as a symbol of their diasporic heritage because it dilutes the message. It's unspecific, and of course, it's turned into a commercial product that doesn't benefit the producers of kente in Ghana. There are others who think it's a great business opportunity. There are others who are happy to share the symbolism, and there are Black Americans who want to respect Ghanaian opinions about kente, and those who don't care. And so I think that kente is a really rich symbol of kind of this interchange, this tension, this connection between Black Americans and Black people throughout the diaspora outside of the continent who are trying to make those connections back to the continent. So that section is in our introductory gallery. In our main gallery, we have the 8 remaining sections, and I'm going to go through them briefly, think a little bit about the theme that I'm speaking about, and talk about one or two pieces within each section. So mothers and motherlands is really it's looking at a larger trend that I've observed as a fashion scholar is that fashion designers seem to be particularly influenced by their mothers, their grandmothers, their aunts. They very often, whether they're Black or not, think about their mother as their first style icon or the first person who taught them to sew. And so I was really fascinated by this idea and how it's been expressed specifically through a diasporic lens. And so, a designer that I've done a lot of research on is Anne Lowe. So, looking at this white dress on the left, Anne Lowe was a Black American designer. She's most famous, I think, for designing Jacqueline Kennedy, the First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy's wedding dress in 1953. But she was a prolific dressmaker who served the American elite, making debutante dresses. Evening gowns, wedding dresses for rich white Americans from the 1910s through the end of her career, the early 1970s. But she learned dressmaking from her grandmother, who had been enslaved in Alabama. And when she was freed in 1860, she and her daughter, Anne Lowe's mother, established a dressmaking salon in Montgomery, Alabama. So at the end of the 19th century, when the vast majority of Black American women were working in agriculture or domestic service, they owned their own business and they were able to provide themselves with safe, creative work that they passed down onto Anne Lowe. She started learning dressmaking and sewing at the age of 6. And so, in her way, she also passes down this legacy to her family. This is a debutante dress that she made for her granddaughter in the 1960s. And this piece beside it on the right is made by the House of Ama, and it's telling a similar story. So, the House of Ama is a American design brand based in Los Angeles, and it's designed by the mother and daughter team, Rebecca Henry and Akuya Shabaka. And this collection, which you heard about in the video, so I won't go too much into it, is all about like kind of familial connections, and of course the brand as a mother and daughter kind of not just a design brand, but a way to archive their history and a larger Black American history, certainly fits into this theme of familial connection. A Black Atlantic is based directly on Paul Gilroy's work, but what's interesting, not only about Gilroy's work as it first appeared in the 1990s, but also the legs it has in kind of scholarship and culture, because a lot of people have expanded the ideas that he introduced and even recontextualized them, because he was really thinking about kind of Black male scholars and their communication between the United States and England. However, we see the Atlantic Ocean as a much larger contact zone between continents and creatives. So this section is all about designers who are looking specifically outside of their own Black communities at different Black communities for inspiration. One of the most layered pieces in this section is by Grace Wales Bonner. is a fantastic and deeply intellectual designer working in London. So this collection is inspired by Haile Selassie and his coronation as emperor in 1930, emperor of Ethiopia. So we see kind of the ways she's interpreted the military uniform, which he was so famous for wearing, into this silver embroidery. But she also incorporates symbols of femininity into this masculine design through these Dwefe comb symbols that you see here with pearls, embroidery and pearls. So drawing on the Akan symbol cosmology system to create them, incorporate these symbols into this ensemble. So not just looking at Ethiopia, but West Africa as well. But interestingly, Haile Selassie is also a very important figure in Jamaican Rastafarianism, and in that way ties back to her own culture because she is British of Jamaican heritage. So I'm really, really inspired and awed by the layers of kind of inspiration and meaning in this piece, as well as its really beautiful execution. And the next piece is by Sindisa Khumalo, who's inspired by Harriet Tubman, the Black American abolitionist, with this piece. So she worked with a graphic designer to design this toile de jour print, and it incorporates two flowers. One is cotton, symbolizing Tubman's enslavement, and then the Philadelphia fleabane flower, which Sindisa Khumalo envisions as the first flower that Harriet Tubman would have seen when crossing into freedom in Philadelphia. So again, there's just these really deep layered stories. And what was interesting to me as an American, Harriet Tubman is a very well-known figure to me, but Sindisa Khumalo spoke about how important it was for her to share this story with her fellow South Africans because it's very little known there, which makes a lot of sense considering the geographic distance. The next section is kind of the opposite of a Black Atlantic because homegoing is really looking at the ways in which designers are exploring their own heritage, their own families, and kind of the diaspora within the diaspora. All of them are based in European or American cities and are creating fashion that draws a link between the fashion systems in those cities in New York or London or Amsterdam back to their cultural roots. So, Kosa is a brand based in Amsterdam, and it's designed by Giorgio Topin. So he is of Surinamese descent, and so we can again trace those colonial lines directly from the Dutch colonization of Suriname back to his kind of presence in Amsterdam in the current moment. But as a menswear designer, he really wanted to explore what it meant to be Black and from Suriname and living in Amsterdam at this current moment. So he went back to Suriname and explored the visual culture of the island, especially the visual culture disseminated from the Maroon communities who set up self-emancipated communities within this very kind of hostile environment under enslavement. So Giorgio connected with people who created this tembe embroidery. Artisans, both Black and Indigenous in Suriname, and enlisted them to contribute to this 2021 collection, Cabra. He created a documentary about it. We show a small clip of it in the exhibition, but it's widely available on YouTube. A really, really interesting documenting his time in Suriname. So if you have a chance, I recommend that you check it out. The documentary is called Cabra after the collection. But what I think was also really important about his collaboration with these artisans is he's really working hard to give them visibility, especially through this documentary. He asked them to speak about their own work. He, writes their names. He, showcases their voices. And I think that's a really missing component when we think about this larger trend of connecting artisans, especially in the global South, to this kind of Western industrialized fashion system. And the second piece I want to highlight in this section is by Mimi Plange. She is an American designer born in Ghana, but based here in New York. And she was looking at scarification rituals, particularly in Benin. And she talks about how, scarification is something that Americans, people in the West, don't really understand, that kind of fall outside of their idea of modern fashion. But when she was looking at this, the symbolism, the beauty, and aesthetics of scarification, that's how she defines fashion in a diasporic sense. So she recreates these scarification aesthetics through this embroidered leather. The next section is called History is Political. This one's pretty straightforward. I think about designers who are using their fashion collections to tell histories, usually their own, sometimes cross diasporically. But these are histories that are sublimated within kind of these global narratives of important, quote unquote, important histories that happen. And so I wanted to think about the ways in which they're elevating history as a way for, as a tool for people to move through the modern world. So this one is particularly contemporary. Esteban Sincera Paz is a Colombian designer who worked very closely with Colombia's first Black female vice president, who was inaugurated in 2022, Francia Marquez. He worked very closely with her throughout her campaign to really use fashion as diplomacy. And we've seen this in the past, but here we see wax print, which is really featured throughout the exhibition as a potent symbol for himself as an Afro-Colombian and for Marquez, whose political campaign was really who really emphasized giving visibility, giving opportunity to Afro-Colombians who are often kind of lost in this larger narrative of the Mezito population. This idea that Colombia is made of, mixed populations. Everyone's a little indigenous and European and African, but she really found that in that narrative, Afro-Colombians were really being left behind. And so, directly addressing their needs and the oppressions they face was very brave of her in her campaign. And she used Esteban African is the name of the brand. She really used this as another way to speak about the visibility of Afro Colombians. And then a piece that we've had in our collection for a little while is by Stone Cherry. So this is a brand that emerged in South Africa. Nakahensi Nkosi created it in the end of the 20th century, going into the 21st century. So not very long into the post-apartheid period. And she licensed Drum Magazine, which you can see pictured on this T-shirt, as a way to teach history to the consumers of her brand. This idea of nostalgia, of pride, of a culture, a Black culture, especially based in Johannesburg, but throughout South Africa, that was vibrant and independent, even under the kind of pressures of apartheid, the violence and the oppression. And so, Drum Magazine is really a central point of nostalgia and a tool, again, that South Africans can use to move forward into a new era. The next section is called Transcendent and Supernatural. And I believe Papa Oppong is going to speak a little bit more about his design and his design practice. But this section incorporates ideas about religion and mythology. Again, this was something, when I did my research, I looked at as many Black diasporic designers as I was able to. And then from this kind of huge database, I started to think about what inspires them, what inspired their particular collections. And I was really drawn to the ones who were telling stories, telling deep and layered stories about Black identity in their collections. And I found that, religion and mythology came up quite often for the designers that I was most interested in. So this is a piece by Faye Noel, who's a designer with her background in Granada, who's based here in Brooklyn, in New York City at this moment. And she is looking at the work of, she's collaborating with an artist, Afro-Colombian artist, excuse me, Afro-Cuban artist, Harmonia Rosales, for this piece. So what you see pictured on this beautiful kaftan is Rosales's image, The Birth of Oshun. So looking at West African religion, the Orisha of love and rivers, picturing this as a diasporic link between West Africa and the Caribbean, where we see a lot of these syncretic links in terms of religion and mythology. I think is a really fascinating way to think about, especially women within the diaspora. And then this pairing on the other side of the platform, both look at Adire and religion in different ways. So on the left-hand side, post-imperial, Ni'i Okobayeho was looking at the Baye Fall, a Muslim sect in Senegal who's really well known for this patchwork that they incorporate into their ways of dressing. It makes them very well known, and it signals their piety in terms of a commitment to poverty and in homage to their founder. But Post Imperial is a Nigerian American brand that is revolves around Adire. So he takes this patchwork inspired by the Baye Fall and recreates it in the Adire dyed top, echoing this long strip woven patchwork. And the next to him is Lagos Space Program, who the designer Adeju Thompson was really kind in recreating this workwear jacket. The author Harriet Hughes, who you heard speak in one of the videos before the talk, she also talks about this brand as well as Emmy Casbett in her study of Nigeria Nigerian fashion in the book. And so I was fascinated by this workwear piece that he creates for an Ife priest. So the idea was that if colonization had never happened, what would the modern priest need in his workwear? And of course, the adire as kind of symbolic kind of armor, as symbolic kind of part of his religious practice is incorporated into the coat as well. So monumental cloth. Early on, I mostly followed kind of the inspirations communicated by the designers in shaping my sections, but early on, I knew that there would be a section dedicated to textiles because textiles has been such a foundational cultural product of the continent and the diaspora. So on the top here, you can see just a tiny sample of cloth, quote unquote, traditional cloth. I think traditional is a word that kind of negates ideas about fashion and evolution and change. But what might be considered traditional cloth, kente, as well as bogolan, and this commemorative cloth from Mali. But on the platform, I'm looking at designers who are taking these pieces, these cloths that are part of their cultural heritage, and merging them with modern ideas. So again, you heard Dr. Hughes as well as the designer Emmanuel Acaro speaking about Akwete and for his brand Emmy Casbet. And so the thing that I really love that he emphasizes in the interview that he was so kind to grant me was this idea of connecting to his own heritage. We see so many designers outside the diaspora who are trying to connect with artisans in the global south, trying to create an aesthetic that's different, that stands out through their labor. But he talks about how he's from the Abia state, so he can speak to the weavers at Akwete in their own language. He can form a cultural connection because he's a part of it. But then he also takes this cloth, he commissions the cloth, takes it back to Lagos, and he tailors it into these modern silhouettes that have appeal on the international market. So in that way, he's a real bridge between this traditional cloth and what we might think of as modern fashion. And then Tebe Magugu in South Africa, taking the idea of the commemorative cloth, the shesheshwe, printed cotton, and taking it down to the personal level. So this collection from his genealogy collection looks at his family as inspiration. So you can see in this photo shoot, this image of his mother inspired this ensemble, but this textile is designed as a commemorative cloth to his members of his own family, including their portraits. So I really love how these textiles are such an ambassador for African culture, diasporic culture, but they really are interpreted in individual ways. And here he really emphasizes that individuality. Tonya Hand Make Fashion was inspired by one of my authors, Talika Kirkland, who wrote about the Caribbean in the book. One of the designers she focuses on is Robert Young and his brand, The Cloth. And you can see this really gorgeous ensemble that we have here. I know he's here today, so hopefully maybe in the Q&A, he'll talk a little bit more about his design practice. But the images I want to focus on, the pieces I want to focus on here are brands who are tackling a very real and very destructive kind of movement of global textiles. So thinking about all the secondhand clothing that winds up on the shores of the continent, thinking about clothes that we might bring to Goodwill. We think we're doing something good, recycling it for later use. A lot of that clothing is, first of all, thrown away, but a lot of it ends up on the continent. And it's really been detrimental to the textile industries as well as fashion design industries. And again, a lot of what is there is some of it is resold, and it does support a lot of workers around that industry. But a lot of it is also discarded, burned, ending up in landfills or even on the sides of roads. So it's a problem that the West has really exported in terms of whatever engagement we have with sustainability onto the global South. But Orina for Nairobi Apparel District, who's also here, and I hope will also speak a little bit about his design practice, as use this secondhand clothing as raw material, as a way, so creating new fashion without creating new textiles. And of course, upcycling isn't just about kind of tampering with a fit, making it fit better, but creating something new and expressing your creativity and aesthetics through these textiles as raw material. Unquo Onwuka does this, similarly uses secondhand clothing as raw material. This is a coat from Dakala cloth. So this is a cloth that her brand that she has invented from made from denim textiles. So you can see that it's really beautifully and intricately pieced together. She works with women who live in camps for people who've been internally displaced because of political violence in Nigeria and other parts of the continent. She recruits those who want to like kind of learn these skills and hires them to create this Dakala cloth. And so in this way, we see that kind of environmental sustainability goes hand in hand with the sustainability of labor. And that's really the focus of the last section I'm going to talk about, which is Ubuntu. I was really taken by this concept and this word. It was first introduced to me kind of in the context of this exhibition through one of my other authors, Joelle Fursley, who is Ivorian and wrote about the Ivorian fashion um, industry for the book. But when these are my authors were also a part of my advisory committee. And so when she was looking at the themes of the exhibition and the pieces I proposed, she proposed this idea of Ubuntu. And what I really love about it is that it is constituted, is evolved from its kind of Zulu origins to thinking about the post-apartheid movement and Nelson Mandela's use of the word. It's really evolved to this idea of African humanism, which is a very specific and distinct philosophy when it comes to how it applies to people on the continent and across the diaspora. So the designers in this section are very closely related to the previous in that most of them are create sustainable fashion, but they're also really focused on social justice in terms of labor. So the two pieces I want to point out on this section are by Tracy Reese on the left and by Studio 189 on the right. So this piece by Studio 189 was created especially for us for the exhibition. Abrima Erdoa worked very closely with us to create this for the exhibition. And here she really thinks about patchwork as a metaphor for the people who come together to, you know, create the clothing that her company designs, and as a metaphor for the diaspora more generally. So even though the company is kind of headquartered here in New York, all of their production happens in Accra and the surrounding areas. And she works with weavers, with dyers, with pattern makers and stitchers, as well as designers to bring these looks together. And in this way, she does a lot of employment outreach and training, job skills training as a way to create sustainable work that is safe and creative, kind of in the same ways that we saw Anne Lowe, learn these things from her grandmother. And she employs a lot of Black women, especially. And so, fashion, in so many cases, is a vehicle for social ills, and these companies are trying to kind of reverse that and give back to the system through their fashion companies. And we can think about how important that is in a place like Accra, but I also want to point out that this is really important for places like Detroit in the United States. So this Tracy Reese piece, Tracy Reese is a very well-known designer on 7th Avenue in New York. She's been working here since the 1980s, but closed her shop in New York, her brand in New York in 2019, and relocated to her home city of Detroit because she wanted her company to be part of the renaissance of that city that was devastated by the loss of manufacturing over the last 30 years. So she onshored her production to Detroit, which is something American designers are constantly talking about doing, onshoring production, bringing manufacturing back to local areas. And she's really actively using her company to give back to her community. This very large building that she built in downtown Detroit not only serves as retail space, but a community center. And she constantly has programs. She's constantly connecting with the educational system in Detroit. And so I think it's easy from a perspective in the United States or the West to think about the ways in which fashion as an industry that we kind of own can like go out into the world and do good, but it's also something that we can use to address a lot of the same issues that we have here at home. So I'm going to stop sharing and hopefully take a few questions.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was a wonderful presentation. I don't know, do we want to give the designers here a chance to talk a little bit before you take more questions?
I don't want to put them on the spot, but if they would like to, I think that would be really enriching.
Yes, definitely, if they want to share a little bit. Papa, Junior, Robert, feel free to unmute yourselves, come on camera if you want. Hello, Papa.
No
I,
pressure. I don't want to put anyone on the spot.
I know, like I'm on the spot, but anyway. First of all, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Like every time I hear you speak about the work that has gone into this exhibition is just so inspiring, and it's really an honor to be a part of all of this. So hi everyone, my name is Papa. Sorry, I look crazy. I'm working. Um, my name is Papa. I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa, but I live and work in New York City. Um, and the piece that you see in the exhibition is, well, we are calling it the Witchcraft Ensemble. It has a lot of local names that I wouldn't bore you with right now. But honestly, when I started the collection that this piece is from, it's called Yopo. It was my 2021 MFA graduate collection. I had just moved to New York, expecting to have an incredible time in New York City, and then COVID happened. So all those hopes and dreams of partying while I go to fashion school were dashed. But it really forced me when I was in the corner in my tiny studio apartment, thinking about what really should my MFA collection represent, right? Knowing the privilege that I have to be able to come to America and study fashion, I really wanted a collection to do more than just be beautiful. So I really looked into the stories of home, and I consider myself, first of all, a storyteller in fashion. So anything that I do should trace back to Ghana. Every collection, every piece, every sketch should have an element that leads you back home to Ghana. And so when I started working on this collection, I created a life cycle of the Ghanaian woman. She goes through marriage, puberty, birth, and all these stages which are familiar to us. But then I put in witchcraft, and everyone is always asking why witchcraft. And for me, that was the factor that I was looking for. I was looking for that moment where people go, but wait, why is witchcraft a part of a Ghanaian woman's life cycle? And then I get to tell you the story, right? So it serves as some sort of an opening or a portal into learning about women's rights and what is happening in Ghana as we speak. And yes, politically, people are trying to abolish, all these negative practices, in relation to witch camps in Ghana and all of these. But the truth is, it's still happening because there's this fine line between human rights and culture. And there's this like, where do you draw the line, right? Because the locals of these communities where witch camps are still prevalent in Ghana are telling you, well, this is our culture, these are our beliefs. You cannot come in and impose your thoughts on us. And then of course, logic and common sense is telling us that a woman at the age of 78 should not be toiling on an open field, when her counterparts in Montauk are retiring and sipping on champagne daily. So it's these issues that are very important to me as a designer. And I think when you have a platform, it really is important that you use it to educate, inform, and inspire people. So this is just part of my core, the ethos of Oppong as a brand, right? And of course, women's rights are very important to me. I'm here because I have the most incredible mom, but not only the most incredible mom, I have the most incredible aunties. Like my mom's best friends are all rallying behind me every day. So it's just everything I do is an ode to this incredible being. And so of course, this ensemble was very important to me. But of course, just to touch a little bit about my process, I grew up in a country where if I wanted to go see fashion from the 1940s in Ghana, there's nowhere to see it. Like you can literally not find it. Unless if your auntie or your grandma has a piece that was passed down, you won't find it. So we don't have a system of archiving in Ghana as it stands. There are museums, but they're flimsy. And I'm just going to be very honest about that. You can't find what you're looking for as opposed to going to the Met and being able to explore fashion from the 50s America or 60s Europe. So I decided to use my brand as a form of archiving tool. I'm like, okay, fine, we can't find the 40s. But when someone looks back in the year 3000 and wants to see fashion from Ghana in 2024, there should be a piece from Papa Oppong. There should be a piece from Tebe Magugu. There should be a piece from some other designer present today that they can then use as their research tool and material. So that is part of my process, is really just telling these stories in a very modern way to also be able to educate and inspire the next generation. This piece was very collaborative. So if you haven't seen it, please go see it. It there are about 6 different artists working on the same piece, which is a little crazy, but everyone played their little role to bring this look to life. And I think that's just, again, the core of Papa Oppong is I know what I'm good at, but I know I'm not good at everything. So I know I can draw a skirt, but I probably can't make that skirt myself in 5 hours. So I employ people who can do that. And I think that's what it is about creativity, understanding your strengths and your weaknesses and knowing when to fill in those gaps with the respective talent. So just to let you know, like it's one of the most important pieces in this collection. It's a collection of about 12 looks, I forget, but this is one that I'm very proud of, and I'm very proud, especially that it's in this exhibition that people can actually see and hear the story and understand, that witch camps are still a thing. And, hopefully with voices like this being added into the conversation, people grow and learn and understand more. And, just also recognize your privilege as a modern person living in New York or wherever you are, where you can live freely. So that's just a little bit about the piece that is in the exhibition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Papa. That was awesome. I have a quick question. I'm gonna be selfish since I'm on the mic here. um, can you talk a little bit about that kind of practice of accusing women of being witches and kind of what's behind it? When would a woman be accused of being a witch, and kind of how long has it been happening?
Absolutely. So this has been going on for, I mean, decades, and it's prevalent in the Gambaga region in the Gambaga town in the northern region of Ghana, right? So this is in the higher, geographically, it's on the north of Ghana, closer to Upper West and Upper East region, which are like in the northern sections of Ghana. And when I was growing up in school, we always thought about witch camps. Like in social studies, they tell you about it, but they just brush on it, and it's like, some women are there, they're slaving, and that's it. The more I grew, the more I realized how simple and how easy it is. I mean, one small decision in my family, and I could literally not be here because my family would have taken a whole different turn, right? In terms of who you marry into, where you end up geographically in Ghana. So when I was doing this research, I was actually, because I was like, I know only the basics, I reached out to Yaba Bedu. I don't know if you know this author. She's Ghanaian, but she's based in the UK, and she has an incredible documentary. You should see it if you haven't seen it. It's called The Witches of Gambaga. So I reached out to her. This was COVID, so no one was trying to do Twitter DMs. They were like, please. So I reached out, and finally she got back to me, and I was like, I'm doing this research on the witches of Gambaga. And I would love to talk to you. And she was very generous. She gave me a lot of insights. And I watched that documentary. I think it's on Amazon Prime still. And there's a very key part in that I want to share with you, where she's interviewing a man. And the man says very, very, very blatantly, when a man has powers, he should be feared, he should be revered, he's incredible. When a woman has the same thing, we can't trust her. She's a witch. And so Yaba keeps pressing him, and he's like, well, no, so you can tell the misogyny is so deeply rooted in that society that there really isn't a way around it. These people believe what they believe, and then there's no changes in that. So the more you watch the documentary, the more you see how they accuse people of witches. Basically, you're old, you're getting wrinkled, you're very, you're shriveled, 80s, you're a very old woman. Somebody dies in the family, who do they turn to? It's you automatically. And it's literally that flimsy of an excuse to accuse someone of witchcraft. It's just, you look old and you probably did it. These women are then, there's some rituals that are performed. A fetish priest comes in and they're like, yes, she's the witch. She caused the death of your uncle, and this man could have probably died of malaria. Something very basic, but they need to find a culprit. So they take this woman to a witch camp where she joins a host of other women who've been accused of the same fates. And then what they do is they work on these camps. So it's literally modern day slavery, where you're working on these camps. You are basically digging, planting, and all of that. A few years into your thing, your sentence, I can't even believe I'm calling it a sentence, but a few years into your sentence, you are invited back. They perform another ritual, and depending on how that ritual goes, you're either freed because you've been cleansed of your witchcraft, or you go back, into the witch camp. And it's like, really, what is the marker? What is the measure here? What is going on here? And the problem is, those who are freed and sent back into society, now the whole community knows you are a witch once. No one wants to deal with you. Your family doesn't want to deal with you. Your friends don't want to. You're just an outcast at this point. So it really just is, from the moment you're accused of being a witch, your life is ruined. It's ruined. There's no getting your life back. Rehabilitation centers, NGOs, and people are trying to help you, but really, your family doesn't need you or want you anymore. So you start to realize how dire the situation is, and how, frankly, insane it is that women are put through these things. Forget all the things that women have to go through and deal with in Africa. Then you're older, you're trying to retire and relax, and now there's this burden as well. So it's like, when does it stop? It never stops. So for me, again, it just made sense in this moment that I'm in New York. I've got a whole different audience looking at my work. I don't want to just make cute dresses. It's easy. I want to challenge myself. I want to use my voice and my platform to highlight this. And I'm very happy that since I put this collection out, so many people have been educated on witch camps. Some people never knew of a thing. They were like, what is this witch camp you're talking about? And so, I think it's doing what it's doing. And through exhibitions like this, it's still continuing to inform and educate the public.
Thank you, Papa. Thank you. I know we have a couple more of our, or if there are any more questions for Papa or even Elizabeth, you can feel free to mention them now. We also have a couple more of our designers that are featured in the exhibition on. So Robert Jr., feel free if you want to share anything about being a part of the exhibition and your design that that was featured in the exhibition.
I can go now. The piece that Elizabeth chose came about from something we call self-help, which was a video we did in 2000, July 2000, in the middle of COVID. My father's house just got burnt, and we built a story. Story was written by a woman called Laurie Antoinette and myself. She directed it. She put together some of the best best director in Trinidad to a young man to pull together the story. That look came about, that is there, from the work that we have in the studio. Who works on it significantly was Mark Eastman, but he pulled together pieces from the studio and compiled one of the looks, because it was a young woman. The story was about a young woman going into the forest to find this place that she considered a safe space burnt. But she saw different versions of herself continually as she moved along. And then she did like an ancestral veneration for the dead, the dead past, or the alive past. And at the house, my father's house, where is somewhere that I connect to very well. But it just had some references of Olokun, and Olokun as we try not to name things from our project, the cloth, as sacred deities or use sacred words, but it had a reference to. Because if I do that, I'm doing this for 38 years, it just opens I think I just opened the floodgate for other people to not hold secrets together, because a big part of what we do is that we touch some parts of the sacred things that happened, that have us, especially in the West, people from the African diaspora, together. But capitalism and finding stories pushes us to reveal those stories. And we have to be somehow say no. Some of these things are not to be told and marketed and used as marketing tools, because we require stories, and to try to find stories, we go to the places that have kept us alive, kept us joyful, kept community together, things that hold us together. So it was an investigation of that, touching this ancestral ritual that happens in the Orisha place, where they feed their ancestors. So that was done in some kind of way in the video. The video is, I will see if I could find the video and put a link on it online for people to see it. But also, we are using fabrics that were that I got to this line called Project Blue, or this Project Blue, by realizing I worked with a young man called Himanshu Shani from a line in there. He did his internship with me in 2000. And he has a beautiful line called 1111, which is the most sacred pieces of work, where pieces of a shirt will take 3 months to make, because it is stitched somewhere, it is bandanied another place. It's dyed by a man called Jesus, and somewhere else. Then it comes back and it hems. And a button is crocheted on every garment. I went and saw fabrics hand woven, fabrics hand spun, fabrics died and realized that, wow, this is really sad. Something really hits us hard because there's no space for that. But to have a loom, to come to these parts with a loom is nearly impossible if you came in as a person involved in forced servitude, involuntary servitude, or as an indentured person. So those traditions, those human traditions, my ancestors and the ancestors of Indian people or Chinese people or the people who live in these, we had to leave them alone, right? The ones that still emerge is like gold making jewelry, because you have that technique and you just figure out the tools, or you can do pottery. But tools, crafts that like require things like that. And also there was an investigation I had a while. There's a cotton in the Caribbean called West Indian Sea Island cotton. Like what? Sea as in the ocean. Sea Island cotton, which is the most precious cotton in the world, compared, identified by people who extract from it, right? So a worker who grows Sea Island cotton, they get about $13 a pound to the company. And a pound of Sea Island cotton might be able to make 3 to 4 shirts that sell for 400 pounds sterling a shirt when it is made, right? But the person who grows the cotton gets less than $13 a pound US for picking it, right? But all this cotton leaves the Caribbean and goes to either Japan, Switzerland, or Italy to be woven. We had once a weaving plant in the Caribbean, but that got covered over by the Montserrat volcano in the 97, close to 2000. So the whole plant got covered up. So this technique of having fabrics that are, because the 1111 project, they do something seed to closet, right? So we are trying to figure that out. So my connection to the piece in that show has hand-woven fabrics. We do an applique, which is a made-up technology. Applique exists all about the space. I've seen Ghanaians do it, a lot of people do it, but I have a technique that we use, and is a way of trying to stitch memory together, right? A vase is broken. Walcott says, Walker speaks about a vase being broken and how you put that back together. Or how could you find yourself again in a mirror and visit yourself again? Or the men are gone, he says too, and the rot remains. The rot is that a lot of colonial structures still exist around us. And that everything here was extracted. Our labor, the raw materials. Trinidad was the first place of oil extraction commercially in the world. We're struggling now because we don't have, the oil is diminishing. We don't have things. The Prime Minister said in 2027 we'll have a better economy. So we are waiting on that. But there are these valuable things like this West Indian Sea Island cotton that no politician will touch, because it will, the commitments we have for growing the cotton, the growers cannot even supply. So I want to get a bill and get it hand-woven in there and see what we could do. Outside the structures, we actually developed a new line, a part of our line, which uses this precious cotton. But the price of those things are extremely priced, because the yard of cotton is 150, 200 US a meter, wholesale, right? So it's trying to touch luxury, but luxury on whose terms? Yeah. So those are the. I wish the piece could have been a white Sea Island cotton piece, but it wasn't. It was around this project of this girl visiting herself many times, and it ends with her. The piece that is there is the piece where she welcomes the main person who starts off the journey, and say, thanks, I accept your offering. This is the best thing to do to honor yourselves. And this exhibition, I am thankful for it, because it's not that it wasn't done before. it didn't feel as important, or if it felt it was important, institutions wouldn't support it, right? So let that book be sold so people can have it. So when the websites disappear, at least people have it in their hands, because that happens. The ancestor George Floyd, I say I am thankful for it, because a lot of him, because a lot of attention was given to, and access to resources was given to institutions, to people like Elizabeth. I'm saying this. You didn't tell me this. I'm saying this. Through some kind of trying to figure out a balance. So thank you for doing this work. For all of us getting involved in either contributing pieces or pieces being purchased is important, for this record to happen, for the work that is a few hundred years of history put along into the 60 pieces. Yeah, and yeah, so thanks.
Thank you so much, Robert. Oh, Elizabeth, were you going to say something? Please go ahead.
I was just going to say that you can see from both Robert and Papa, like, just the deep layers of like culture and resources and meaning, both materially and in terms of ideas that go into these fashion designs. And that's what I'm really drawn to as a curator, and and the ways in which fashion is art. You know, a t-shirt from H&M is an art, but when we think about fashion on this level, it's art and it belongs in a museum.
Yeah, definitely.
I will also say it needs to be worn by many of us. And even the revolutionary act of purchasing designers like us, and not making the impulse to buy low cost, fast made, is an intelligent decision. Is an awkward decision, is a clumsy. My best word I use is obzoki. Obzoki is something that is dense up and twisted. You will find difficulty in finding our product, but find and buy it and wear it. You'll see how your life changes.
Where can
Because
we find
that
the
is the
product?
revolutionary act. So it's not museum. Yes, research has to happen, but it has to be worn and lived in. Thanks.
That is a very, very good point.
And it supports our economies and our attempts. All right, sorry.
So I was asking, where can we find your product?
Oh, the claw.com is a way to start. You'll just get a glimpse of some of the Instagram. The websites are very difficult to maintain. You notice even very large website companies that do trade, they're falling apart. So there is a guide there. We have a shop in Trinidad. We sell a small shop in Martha's Vineyard. We have a space in Santa Fe. We just picked up something in out of Tokyo, pick up something in Ukraine recently because I just came back. Thankful to Afrexim Bank and Canex. They didn't sponsor this, but they were like, how is this happening and we are not involved?
I love
Canex. Yeah, Canex is an interesting project that has taken on a lot of the designers here in the show are part of the program of trying to find markets around the world, and they are supporting the African creative diaspora. So find them and widen the network. But we have other places that we are available. There's a small shop in Baltimore called Blue Light Junction that has pieces also. They work with Indigo, Go Indigo. Kenya Miles runs it. She grows and she extracts the dyes, and she sells pigment, and she dyes fabric. So those are other places, but yeah, I'm done. But that's where you can find the things. Or come to Trinidad for Carnival.
I just dropped the Instagrams of the cloth, Papa Oppong and Nairobi Apparel District in the chat. But
Okay.
yes, please go buy these designers, because I mean, if you want clothing that is gorgeous and means something, in a lot of different levels, it's just, it's better to, if we really want to tackle sustainability, it's much better to like spend more on something that lasts forever than keep spending what ends up being more on trash continually.
Yeah.
Junie, I'm not sure if you still want to share anything. Do you want to say hello briefly? We have a few more minutes. We'll be wrapping up shortly.
Yeah. Hi everyone.
Hello.
My name is
Hi.
my name is hi. My name is Junior Orina. I'm a designer. I'm an artist, and I'm also part of a community here in Nairobi, Kenya, of creatives. My brand is called Nairobi Apparel District, and Nairobi Apparel District is basically where upcycling meets art. So ideally, as you know, Kenya and Nairobi is a huge what do you call, like a thrift kind of dumping zone or loading zone, whatever you want to call it. So growing up in Nairobi, Kenya, it was always a culture of us to go to these kinds of market and be able to thrift, find things on the cheap. Because if you wouldn't be able to get them on the low, it's rather you maybe go buy them maybe in the boutiques, which is expensive. So ideally, it wasn't my initial passion for me to be in the fashion industry. But I have a background. My background is in law, but I didn't pursue that. Just before campus and just before I was in in secondary school, I started to love fashion, start to have an eye for fashion and whatnot. So when I was in campus, I now decided to start my own brand, which basically I used to 100% recycle the pieces that I used to get at these markets, Kikomba. So I used to get the jackets and used to paint them, put on a little Bob Marley sticker, sew them on, and then put them in the market. So I found it like people used to resonate more to that. And having a big background into uh, history, especially Pan-Africanism, this is something that I really like wanted to push. So ideally, in my advancement in the fashion industry, I now started to delve in more into what I can call Pan-African opium. So that's like an amalgamation of luxury and mystery. And as you can see, like the collection that I presented, like it's full on black with a screen print of image of Jesus Christ, of which, yes, Jesus Christ was my inspiration for that collection. Ideally, I chose to do like the black. The black fabric was upcycled, and I picked them up in a local market that uses like that discards like this excess fabrics from textile industries that are here in Kenya, the so-called EPZs and those processing zones here. So got the fabric. I designed on my computer the Jesus Christ print with the whole kind of mystery looking like print at the back. So mostly my mediums, I love to do screen printing. So I infuse the prints before on the cloth, and then later I sew on the whole fabric. And then when you see the pants, it's a full-on print. It's black and with a full-on black and white print of the same print. Yeah, so ideally my choice of colors, I decided to use like white on black for the reasons that uh, in the scripture it kind of says like Jesus is the light. So in the light in the dark. So me using the white seams on the black clothing and the black and the white print on the black clothing was an infusing of that kind of storytelling. Yeah. So mostly my pieces, when you look at my pieces, mostly are I go big on prints, but I also do like for the recycled and upcycling pieces that I do, like I do mostly like culture inspired leaders like Nelson Mandela, I do Sankara, I'm big on that. I do, I can do, I mean, I want to do new collection on Fela Kuti and whatnot. So ideally, my purpose and my vision for NAD and for all of us is to be able to like be a cultural hub for upcycling and all those ethical practices that can be able to shift like consumerism and be able to promote healthy consumption in fashion. So I can say thank you, Ure, for the opportunity for present here, and also thank you, Elizabeth, for the feature. I hope maybe in the future you can be able to like tell more stories that are influencing the culture and be able to work on new projects. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Junior. Awesome to learn so much more about your brand. I know that we've also been following you for some time, and just want to thank you for taking the time to join today. Um, Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to say any last words as we still leave it open to people to ask any questions. Let me see, what time is it? Probably have about 5 minutes to ask your question before. I don't want to hog the mic, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to share, unmute yourself, and go ahead.
Yeah, definitely open to any last questions. But thank you, uh, Robert and Papa and Junior, because I definitely put you guys on the spot. So thank you for being so generous and speaking about your practices and your brands.
So there's no questions. I guess I'll be selfish then. Elizabeth, for you, I know you told me that you started to put this, started the process in 2019, so like 5 years for it to fully come together, which is incredible that it takes that long to put together an exhibition. One question I have for you is that over those 5 years, as you were putting things together, was there anything that kind of surprised you as you worked on it and did your research and learned more about fashion across the diaspora?
Well, I always knew that there were these amazing stories that designers were telling. And so, but I was constantly surprised at the depth and the research and the thoughtfulness that designers are putting into their collections from all sides, from the storytelling, from the materiality, from the way they were kind of structurally pattern made, all of these things coming together. And so I was surprised at how many pieces I could find that had these deep narratives about what it means to be a diasporic subject in the modern world. And there were pieces I wanted to keep this show relatively small so that every piece could be seen from all angles on like kind of floating platforms off the wall. And so it was really hard narrowing it down, but just just the rich creativity out there that and fashion is like Robert said, like it for me it's an object of culture that goes into a museum, but it also is the double-edged sword. Is it's a product for people that you can engage with these stories or just engage with the aesthetics. So I'm constantly surprised by the creativity of designers.
Great, great. Thank you so much. And then my final question for you is, I know that one thing that Papa mentioned is that in Ghana, there is no kind of archiving of any kind for fashion. And I think that's probably the same across many parts of the world outside of maybe like the US and like Europe and certain parts of Asia. For those of us who come from parts of the world where this isn't happening, what can we do? What can we begin to do for yourself, who's a curator who focuses essentially on this? What can we begin to do now to make sure that what is being produced now is being archived and being stored, and the history is being kept?
Well, for designers, and I know it's so difficult for designers to keep an archive, but it's amazing if you are able to do it in terms of space and time and energy to keep an archive of your work so that you have it for the future. But as just kind of people out in the world, in your cities, in your towns, if you have institutions, um, tell them that you're interested in fashion, tell them that you're interested in textiles, tell them you're interested in these kinds of programs because if there's a demand for an audience, an institution will try and meet that demand because they want to bring you in. There's a Costume Institute in South Africa, which is really amazing. But I hope that, and costume exhibition is still relatively new in the US as well. So it's growing all over the world. People love fashion, and so they're starting to think about it in a museum context. But talk to the people in your community who put on events, who put on programs, who put on exhibitions, and tell them that you want it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that great piece of advice. And I think with that, with that, we'll close out this session. I'm gonna call up the other Papa on the line, Papa Yayemi, who is also a designer actually from Nigeria, based in Amsterdam at the moment. He's the co-founder of BAF along with me. So I'll call him to just give a closing remarks, and then we'll be done for the day. Over to you, Papa.
Yeah, thank you everyone for today. Thank you, Udochi, for holding the space for me all this while. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing. I really learned so many things. I was like going on on Google all the time while you were presenting to check out, especially the documentary you mentioned about the Zosa brand, I think, because he also lives. And I saw that you said something about the brand being based in Amsterdam as well. So I was like, oh, interesting. I could figure out someone around me that I could probably reach out to and see to meet up. Thank you everyone for sharing.
Okay, sure. Thank you, everyone. I think we'll bring it to a close now. Just want to encourage you all to follow us on socials if you don't already do. We are at Building African Fashion across most of our platforms, Instagram and Facebook. And we'll also send an email after this so that you can rewatch this session so that you can have access to it. But thank you again for coming out, and we look forward to having you in more of our events. And please, if you are in New York, please go out and see the exhibition. It's really wonderful. Take your friends, go see it, and just have a wonderful time in the city while you're there. So